A warm welcome to you here at THEKI, your podcast for consciousness, health, and happiness. My name is Sandra, and over the last few years, I've talked a lot about the cosmic change, about this time of transition, about the ascension process of humanity and the earth, both in podcasts and also written in my book, Involution. And new information, new insights are always being added, and especially now, with the entry into the year 2025, especially with the spring of 2025, we've also entered into completely new energies, into completely new frequencies. There have been huge shifts, which most of us have also felt, and it just urged me now to make another general summary of this change so that everything isn't always spread across so many podcasts, but that there's a kind of main road here for those who just want to get some basic information, like what are you actually talking about, Sandra? And also for you, of course, to forward it, to share it with your friends, with your loved ones, simply where you have the feeling that someone should know about this in more detail. So, of course, a summary like this can only touch on topics. And whenever you feel while listening that you'd like to dive deeper into a topic, then read my book, Involution, or my book, Soul Power, or also my first book, THEKI, Evolve Yourself. Or go to my YouTube channel, THEKI, and simply search with keywords that you want to find here. There's so much information from me. You'll definitely find what you're looking for if you make the effort. And then you can dive deeper into one topic or another with me, just as you'd like. Yes, let's get started with what I've summarized for you. Fundamentally, this entire period since 2012 has been very special, and since 2020, we've all been noticing it, each in our own individual way. And now, the years 2025 and 2026 are revealing themselves to be the absolute core transition years. In the midst of this gigantic cosmic change that we are embedded in as humanity on this earth, we can see that collectively there are increasingly primarily two timelines, and that each of us is allowed to decide, must also decide, and often has already decided. Sometimes it's already completely clear which timeline will continue on, and sometimes it's not, or it's still shaky, it's still switching back and forth. And depending on which timeline we follow, we will naturally experience a completely new collective reality. Each of us can, may, and yes, also must now choose their path, and it's already happening. For many of us, it's very conscious, for others, still very unconscious. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Unconscious doesn't always mean you'll end up on the wrong timeline. Unconscious can also mean I may not deal with such things, but my frequency, my heart space is already vibrating in the consciousness of the new age. And that's why it happens on its own. You know, it would be terrible if it were otherwise. Then many people who simply have no access to such information wouldn't be able to come along, and that's definitely not how it is. On the other hand, someone who decides on an ego level but doesn't actually live that way and doesn't behave in a life-affirming manner, they won't come along either, not even with all the information. Many of us have recognized all this for a long time, and this ever-widening gap between the timelines, we naturally see it in our human encounters, in our human relationships, and in the realities that are now taking very different shapes. Some are entering into the new consciousness of the new earth and thus ascending, while others simply remain in the density and limitation. And as I always say, there is no better or worse, even if our mind wants to judge it that way and say, hey, this ascension timeline is definitely better than the other one. But in truth, the soul simply strives for experience. And on the level of the soul, there is also no time. So it doesn't matter how long we take, how many detours we make, or whatever. What counts in the end is the accumulated experience, not the time. And who knows how many times I've been here, how many times you've been here. Judging others makes no sense at all in this time. Instead, we should have reverence and respect for the choice of every soul. Specifically in my book Involution, and also in some podcasts and seminars, I talk about the ancient high cultures that prophesied very specific events for our time today, the time we are living in right now. They tell us about cosmic and recurring cycles, very large cycles and smaller cycles of times of unconsciousness, and then again a new rise in the consciousness of humanity. There's the Tzolk'in, also known as the Mayan calendar, and it drew our attention to the year 2012, a day when, of course, the world didn't end in the conventional sense, but 2012 did mark a very important point. Specifically, in 2012, on December 21st, a cycle thousands of years old ended, and a new one began. In 2012, we truly entered a new age once again. An old world came to an end, not the earth, but the old world, which is also called the Iron Age, the Kali Yuga. Millennia of dense energy are ending. Millennia in which humanity lived separated from its divine self, was mired in materialism, and gave in to illusions and deceptions, are ending. And the age that began in 2012 brings us a whole new world, a whole new reality, namely one that is light-filled, loving, conscious, and enlightened, in which people can actually experience their cosmic reconnection again, and then also live that connection. And in connection with that, a great deal of transformation is happening. And this transformation will practically reach its peak in 2025 and 2026. After that, things will continue on a completely new level. And it is precisely in these years right now that it's being decided which part of humanity will take one timeline and which part will take the other. One timeline is an ascension timeline. This means that we can, right here and now, in this incarnation, in this body, ascend to the next higher density. That is from 3, 4D to 5D into the fifth dimension. The other timeline is continued imprisonment in the fear matrix. I'll come back to that with examples from time to time. And we can see these signs everywhere, both those of the ascension timeline and the timeline of further destructiveness, and also, yes, imprisonment, if you will. What's important now, among other things, is to really recognize and distinguish between these timelines so that we don't keep jumping back and forth, but instead choose very clearly and consciously, tune into the ascension wave if that's what we want. And since you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume that's what you want, because this is truly, it's a true rebirth into our divine primordial power. So we are all choosing right now, in this very moment, whether we ascend or whether we remain trapped in illusions, in deceptions, in all the programs of the old matrix. One path leads us into a higher vibrating reality. There, we can unfold our divine consciousness again, truly reconnect and experience ourselves again as multidimensional human beings. And the other path, that one will continue to be controlled by fear and materialism. There, people will continue to be kept small, or rather, they allow themselves to be kept small because they are choosing it. So anyone who remains stuck in these old paradigms, in these old world views, and perhaps is also afraid of change, cannot open their heart. And by doing so, they continue to choose this reality. Perhaps not too much will change for some, but for others, it will also become quite uncomfortable because the resistance is just so great. Strictly speaking, we can imagine this as two versions of the earth that exist simultaneously for a while. We can still perceive the other one, but the more we move apart, and this is already very visible in these times, the less understanding and also, yes, communication at eye level, or rather at heart level, is then possible. And at some point, we also notice we don't even try anymore. And at some point, we may have almost forgotten the other side. But whoever manages and also wants to open their heart now and internally aligns with the highest, they can truly experience this completely new reality, which unfolds in a new way daily. And in this reality, yes, a very deep unity with all life can be experienced with humans, animals, nature, with the entire cosmos. And in this expanded consciousness, our psychic senses are also clearer, our intuition is stronger again, we feel love more deeply again, and gratitude and connectedness, this all oneness which we may have already heard of, or which we may believe in, but which we perhaps couldn't quite feel or couldn't always hold, that is now taking up more and more space in our lives. And not just in our lives, but in many, many lives, in many, many people on this earth. Yes, and as I said, whoever can't do anything with that and somehow scoffs at it or simply doesn't want it and continues to surrender to the old world views and control mechanisms, they will get them too, because everyone has free will. Possibly then with even more density, with even more chaos and confusion. And we're already seeing that on the world stage. A lot of chaos and confusion. And you see, it's a choice. It's a choice we all make, and not on a determined day or on Judgment Day, as the religions proclaim, but right here and now in your life today, in every decision. Because everything you are, what you do, what you send out is frequency, is vibration, and that's why you can't deceive. No one can deceive. You can't pretend to be something that doesn't correspond to your deepest inner self. Of course, you can deceive yourself. You can talk yourself into things, and maybe you can also deceive a few people on an ego level. But you will never deceive the frequency. You choose a timeline with the frequency you operate on. So it's never about punishment, as some like to call it, or as it sometimes sounds in religions or when we talk about karma. No, it's always about resonance. It actually couldn't be any clearer, more honest, and more truthful. It's brilliant. That's exactly how the selection happens. Yes, and in these past years, up to 2025, we have all seen it. It has happened right before our very eyes, how the old world was gradually dismantled. The apocalypse that is happening, it is the revelation of the old systems, the revelation of how controlled, how hostile to life they were in part. And that is becoming clearer and clearer to everyone now, for years now, but especially enormously in these last 2 years. And these old systems, they have simply become so obsolete for so many people who are now choosing something else. And starting this year, we will see very big changes also on the collective world stage. And we are already seeing them in part, just not quite in Europe yet, but a lot is being revealed there too. Anyone who looks more closely can see it. The governments are revealing their control, and many are already losing it. The financial systems are becoming as unstable as, yes, never before, or not for a very long time. All the old artificial and life hostile systems are collapsing one by one. The school system, the healthcare system, the religious systems, all these institutions that have somehow tried to intercept us, to control us, to misguide us, to deceive us. That's no longer possible when humanity reawakens. And this end of the old age doesn't mean that we suddenly won't have any more challenges. Instead, it means to be very conscious, to become ever more conscious with the beginning of the new age and to choose consciously. Anyone who doesn't want to or can't resonate with this now will experience that their personal challenges become ever greater and, yes, perhaps even unbearable. So everything simply has to become more and more obvious so that you can still choose, so that you realize, okay, I don't want to continue on this path after all. Maybe there is something more life affirming, something more worth living. And whoever resonates with this now, whoever surrenders, also to trust that it will be all right, that they will be guided, whoever can open up to the new now, even if they don't know exactly where it's going, learns to ride the waves more and more as they come. So, they will be able to surrender trustfully, even when control is no longer there. Control can no longer be there because it belonged to the old world. This means it might often feel to us as if we are completely losing control, but only our ego is losing control. Our true self is guided and it chooses this path and wants this path. And it's also about this choice now to say, okay, then I will go with my true self. And my ego might not be able to logically explain all the decisions right now, but it will catch up eventually. Egos can also be transcended. They don't have to be abandoned or abolished. So the whole process we are experiencing is a huge invitation to expand and to truly and fully recognize and live our own creative power again, to use our power to effect change purposefully again. There are no saviors from the outside, and that is a very important realization in this time, because it still looks to some as if certain politicians or certain religious figures or whoever else will save us. There are no saviors. Why not? There can't be, there mustn't be, because this is a time of self-empowerment. It's about rediscovering your own power and greatness completely within yourself, experiencing it again, and then also using it for the highest good. And then these completely new, life-affirming realities open up. Then we recognize what it's like to be soul-aligned, and synchronicities appear in our lives. There are profound insights into connections and, above all, this recognition of our own limitless potential. And whoever follows this call will have an ever easier time during this period. The only thing that lags behind is the ego, which constantly needs explanations that may not always be available at this time. But fundamentally, we will make good progress if we live this way. When we no longer support struggle, ego, abuse of power, deception, exploitation, and so on, in any way by playing the role of victim, perpetrator, or savior. That doesn't make things any easier. It just keeps confirming the old programs. And what we are currently experiencing out there is the final war. And this final war is not being fought with weapons, but with our consciousness. And this is what these ancient texts and prophecies teach us, because it's not the first time we have been through a time like this. For centuries, yes, sometimes even for millennia, certain, yes, let's call them special interest groups, have worked to keep humanity asleep by working with fear, with division, with distraction, with deception, yes, with a great deal of untruth and half-truths. And we still see these effects clearly, but the wave of awakening is also becoming more and more visible. The frequency of the earth is rising, and so these controlling entities are losing their power, because the false fear matrix that they have erected can no longer be sustained in the high frequency. That's why everything is becoming more and more obvious. That's why the systems are crumbling. And these years, 2025 and 2026, are crucial in many respects, and also, yes, totally exciting if we surrender to it. Of course, we can also perceive them now as grueling and full of suffering, but we can also look at them from a higher perspective, from the perspective that I am offering you right now, and consider them very joyful, because without a doubt, the veils are becoming thinner. And even the people who have resisted looking in that direction until now, they actually can't look away anymore. They are beginning, whether they want to or not, to recognize the programming. Yes, some aren't quite there yet, others are further along, but don't want to fully admit it, and that's all okay. They're allowed to be. Every soul chooses, and everyone has their own unique challenges in this time. We shouldn't worry about others, but really stay with ourselves and see how we can move forward and who wants to walk alongside us. Of course, we can offer help if it's wanted, but often it's not wanted at all. And then we don't have to act like know-it-alls and teachers. It was never about fighting against any external enemies, and that's why we don't have to look for anyone to blame. Of course, there are those who have played the role of being responsible and still do. But ultimately, this is all our projection, and I explain this in various videos how it works with the mirrors and how we change the outside from within us. It's about a misguided perception within us that can now be ended. And just now, in the spring of 2025, there were enormous shifts, meaning enormous increases in frequency. And sometimes they're just, yes, they're often just ups and downs. Um, this spring, however, I noticed that a completely new base frequency was created, which is now being held and serves as the foundation for further energy increases. And this base frequency that we have now, it empowers all human beings to realign their frequencies completely anew. We are becoming aware of ourselves again, aware of what we stand for, what values we actually have within us and want to support in life. And we are also perceiving the frequency of truth more and more. You know, and that's important because in this time where so much work was done with deception and so on, we sometimes couldn't tell the difference anymore. Not just because it was so well done, but mainly because it had been done so well for generations that we were sometimes misinformed, even by the people we grew up with who loved us, who wanted to give us the best. We were still misinformed because they themselves had already been misinformed, and so on and so on. And now we are entering this frequency where we simply notice truth and lies. They vibrate very differently, and some feel it, others hear it in the tone, and still others see it. How something darkens when it's not true, or simply no inner images appear for it, while the truth plays out before you like a beautiful movie. So we are mastering our own perception again, and through that, we become more and more independent. We need less and less advice. We need fewer and fewer people to tell us what's right and wrong and why, and what has been proven and what hasn't. It is a space of love within us, our heart space, that is once again becoming the most important center for us. And that is a compass that never lets us down. With this compass, with this heart compass, we can navigate very clearly and, on one hand, distinguish truth from untruth and walk more and more clearly with the truth. On the other hand, also our very own truth. What am I here for? What did I perhaps even plan for this incarnation? Who did I arrange to meet with for it, and so on? We can perceive and live that more and more as well. And so, with this truthfulness, our power of influence extends far beyond what was possible before. And many are already noticing this, that their manifestations are happening much faster, and their thoughts are running much faster, that insights are coming much faster, and connections are becoming clearer, and so on and so on. Time can also feel completely different. We perceive time differently because the cosmic waves are mixing with our perception of time and thus simply changing everything, because time is not something linear. And when it resonates in waves with the cosmos, then time suddenly becomes something completely different. In my book, Soul Power, I also go into that more deeply, into the soul plan and the multidimensionality of time and so on. Yes, for many people, unusual symptoms may also appear, perhaps temporarily, and they are so multifaceted. In my book, Involution, I've filled many pages with what all that can be and what causes it, and what we can then do about it. I'll just name a few here now. For example, intense dreams, a clearer intuition, also faster releases of yes, emotional blockages that suddenly resolve, that can also resolve spontaneously. Then physical sensations like energy constantly flowing through, tingling, feeling hot and cold, having energy surges, often at night, which is why you might lie awake as if you were under a current. All of this are simply signs that our body is adapting to the higher frequency, right? Sometimes the body is ahead, and then it has to wait until the collective, or rather the Earth's energy, has reached its own vibration again. And sometimes it also lags behind and has to adjust upwards again. Sometimes we might feel completely euphoric, and sometimes we're suddenly exhausted again and don't even know why. And there are also definitely phases where you feel very disoriented, where you might not even know anymore, just spontaneously, what's my name? How old am I? What month is it? Is it morning, noon, or evening? What did I just want from the fridge? That's simply because we are also perceiving more and more multidimensionally and are then sometimes bilocating and don't even know why the body here has just done this or that. The key to everything is to really stay present within ourselves, to stay grounded, to trust the process, and also, if you do THEKI, to use all the tools, yes, the 8, the torus breathing, simply everything that somehow stabilizes you. You can also find the multidimensional grounding on my YouTube channel. That too can help incredibly during this time. That's, yes, a very, very important, great exercise. Yes, and all these changes that we are currently going through in frequency and vibration and our own perception, that has an effect, of course, also affects our reality. This means it's not just we who are changing, but with every change within us, our reality out there, so to speak, changes as well. And then we have to adjust to that as well. So we really have our work cut out for us right now. The old systems of the fear matrix, as I like to call it, are now changing fundamentally. And we can really expect quite a lot. Some will collapse completely, while others will simply be changed, revolutionized. Basically, we can say that anything that was hostile to life in any way will no longer be able to exist in the new frequencies, because what is hostile to life vibrates too low, period. Everything that is life-affirming will return. It will flourish again, and there will be truly wonderful opportunities for new solutions in all these systems, but also in all the global issues, which I'll get to as well. When humanity is collectively back in a higher frequency and rediscovers its multidimensional nature, then it's not only possible, but completely natural to lead a life free from fear and limitation and to become fully aware of one's own potential once again. Of course, we will still have challenges, but they will be on a completely different level. We won't have to tear down the old systems anymore because they will have already been torn down. Instead, it will be about finding truly new solutions and, integrating all of that into the new world. And that's where the heart compass helps us, the synchronicities, and consciously perceiving all of that, consciously perceiving our own inner guidance, which is always there, coming from the higher vibrating dimensions of our soul, our spiritual team, and so on. You know, for millennia, humanity was trapped in this 3D matrix. Right now, most are in 4D, so they have an overview, but they're not quite out of it yet. And these are systems that were created to keep people small. They are trained for survival mode, for material success, external validation, dependency, and they are less and less able to perceive their divine nature. Of course, religions also played their part in that, teaching us that we shouldn't, that we weren't allowed to. That could be wrong and sinful. But all these created illusions are now being understood, and they are giving way to the new frequency, to truth, and to insight. And that means this is precisely why we are experiencing so much chaos externally right now, in politics, in the financial system, with wars and so on. Because, of course, the old players are desperately trying to somehow maintain these power structures, to somehow force something through. But these very low vibrating, dense frequencies that have always supported them are now dissipating. And so they can't really connect anymore. They can't really find solutions anymore. They can basically only stir up fear, confusion, and chaos um, in order to push the energy down to some degree through the collective that still responds to it. But the ascension is unstoppable. At least in this timeline, what they have planned will no longer work. The whole thing is so obvious, the whole chaos, the contradictions, and also the senselessness in all these actions. Almost everyone sees that by now. And again, it's not the world or the earth that is ending, it's only the world of the old systems. And yes, we can take the example of the caterpillar and the butterfly. In the same way, our world is in the process of simply recreating itself. It will still be the same world and yet not anymore. We will hardly recognize it in some parts also on a material level. There too we will experience some changes in the Earth's landscape. I know we've heard many of these things so often in recent years, and then it seems like nothing has happened. A lot has always been happening, but it just took its time. And in a cycle that lasts for millennia, what are a few years? Yes, as far as I'm concerned, it could have gone faster in some ways, but um, many people are kind of in between right now. And I understand that on the one hand, there's still some hope, but a doubt also lingers. And then, through this altered perception of time, everything becomes a bit blurry. Yes, the months fly by, and much of what is happening right now, both outside and inside, feels somehow so intangible, incomprehensible. But right now is precisely the time to really turn it up, to be conscious again, and to always remain conscious, and to choose consciously again and again. And so we will experience our manifestations coming true faster than ever before. And yes, we can also awaken with confusing speed into entirely new realities. And that too takes time, yes. When you've suddenly created a new reality for yourself, you need a little time to process it. And from the outside, it might look like nothing is happening, but that's just a resting phase before the next leap. In the higher dimensions, time is fluid. It's completely different there. It accelerates or slows down depending on your consciousness, your own vibration, and also the speed of your thoughts. So maybe you've noticed the difference that when you surrender to your higher guidance, your thoughts are completely free and also incredibly fast and focused. And that is a foundation for manifesting incredibly quickly as well. And all of this explains why people who have aligned themselves with this spiritual development often feel or simply witness miracles happening effortlessly. And that changes can truly be initiated by oneself in alignment with one's own higher self and ultimately with the divine will. So we are not forcing anything that wouldn't be in harmony with all that is. Instead, through our spiritual development, we automatically arrive at a consciousness where we no longer choose differently, no longer want anything other than what serves everyone, and what our soul has also chosen as our role. It all comes more and more into alignment. Yes, everything we experience right now is simply a reflection of our inner state, and this is clearer than ever. Of course, this is also true for those who are still stuck in the old paradigms and feel more trapped than ever in the chaos, barely knowing how to take the next step because they are simply afraid. And that is why it is so important in this time, perhaps more important than ever, to be truly aware of our thoughts, feelings, our true intentions and motivations, and to only send out what carries the frequency of love, of abundance, of joy. And there are now some people who are awakening in such a way that they suddenly feel an inner mission, hear an inner call, a true calling. Yes, they feel they have something to fulfill here, and their soul's plan is becoming more and more accessible. You can read into it and understand why certain people are coming into your life right now, why certain synchronicities are occurring, and you can get started with it right away. Also, very, very many helper souls have incarnated into this time of change to help the people who still need assistance with the transition into the new age. And in this process of awakening, yes, you have to guide people gently. And often, those who have already gone through their own processes can do that better than those who are still in the midst of it. An exchange can take place, but often you don't fully understand it yet. And the helper souls who are awakening now, and I've also made a separate podcast about this, they are often simply a few steps ahead. Then there is also the information about the star seeds. The star seeds who have also incarnated here in great numbers and who have previously lived in other higher dimensional civilizations. And so they bring knowledge to Earth, and as soon as everything is ready, can also provide a vibrant and new vision, as well as clear impulses for action. So this knowledge that we need, for example, about free energy, how we can clean the oceans again, how we can live together peacefully in communities again, and so on. They know all of this. They bring it all with them, the helper souls and star seeds. They bring a deep knowledge of the cosmic laws and their interplay, and they help us to let go of the purely materialistic worldview and to truly and fully find our way into the new spiritual age. And this knowledge is anchored in every one of us. Every soul knows this. But sometimes we still need a little time to, unfold it, to let it blossom, and the starseeds sometimes simply have a much easier time with that. Fundamentally, we can say this is the return of the Christ consciousness. And it is also, yes, through these people whom I perceive as lighthouses, as lights of the world, it's easier to reconnect with that because they are already living it. They radiate it. They are benevolent. They are loving. They are in unity. You can't push their buttons as much anymore, or not at all. And so they inspire, they spread this Christ consciousness more and more throughout the world. And the return of the Christ consciousness has been predicted for millennia in religious texts. And yet many people right now still can't understand that we are living in this exact time right here and now. Little by little, the souls who have chosen the timeline of ascension are now also entering a state of wisdom, of love, of recognition, of pure consciousness, and yes, ultimately, of enlightenment. And this is a blueprint that each of us carries, the blueprint of our divine existence, our multidimensionality. It is now being reactivated within us. And this, yes, leads to an unconditional alignment with these values to support everything that is life affirming. And so it happens all by itself. Everything that is yet to come, that the old systems break down, transform, and then completely new possibilities arise. It simply can't be any other way for every single person who has awakened and is part of this. And 2025, especially this spring, but also the rest of the year, is so significant because the energies of the earth are gradually aligning more and more with these higher dimensional frequencies. So the earth is rising and rising and rising, so to speak, in frequency. And that means the end of the old limited ways has been completely ushered in. People will naturally rise above low vibrations, conflicts, and illusions, and they will become fully alive again, alive with compassion, wisdom, and also creative power. Everything that was suppressed and not allowed to be lived can now be set free again. And this means that it is not just about the powerful and mysterious cosmic forces at work, but that humanity itself is now reclaiming its divine heritage and is truly stepping into it, quite naturally, simply because it belongs to us. Yes, and in this process, there is another important characteristic that I would like to share with you now, and that is in the course of this spiritual awakening, a very profound physical transformation is also taking place. In official science, what's known as junk DNA or trash DNA or sleeping DNA has been studied for a long time. These are parts of human genetics that are practically inactive, which is why they are supposedly sleeping. Perhaps their functions have simply not been truly understood and decoded until now. But there is also a lot of secret research where much, much more is already known than what has been reported to us humans so far, or what is taught in official physics, biology, and so on. Yes, taught. A lower consciousness can never understand a higher consciousness. That's why some researchers can never decode these parts of the DNA because they simply won't understand them. Understanding can only happen on the same level or on a higher level, never on a lower one. And this is a brilliant protection that life gives itself, ensuring that no one can play with something they don't understand. Of course, these attempts are being made, and we've seen in recent years that people have been playing with DNA. You know what I mean? But what is emerging in the current quality of our time is a truly astonishing resonance between cosmic radiation and our DNA. And this reverses much of what may have already happened if, in the process, a spiritual awakening has taken place instead. There are some researchers who are, on one hand, spiritually oriented and on the other, are also active in fields like physics, chemistry, and so on. They have recognized that through the incoming frequencies from the cosmos, the inactive sleeping DNA is being activated. Isn't that astonishing? So humanity is not only in a very remarkable transitional phase spiritually, but the body is also changing its structure. The DNA is changing its structure. Specifically, we are changing from being carbon-based to a crystalline fluid structure. And this change allows higher frequencies to be integrated into the body, which in turn has many, many effects. Our true being awakens. And yes, besides heightened perception and multidimensionality, the lifespan can actually be extended because illness and simple physical limitations, they just don't make sense anymore. In the higher vibration, we are conscious again, we eat consciously again, we live consciously, we consciously engage with our soul's plan, with our thoughts and feelings. And so in our trinity of body, soul, and spirit, the most densely vibrating part, the body no longer has any reason to report problems because we are already keeping everything pure on the soul and spirit level. Everything that was illness and limitation belonged to the past age, and we have already left that behind us. In fact, since 2012, for 13 years now, and it will only continue in one direction, further up, onward to ascension. Yes, through our planet Earth, and this might also be important for you to know, energy pathways run through. You can imagine it like a giant grid that surrounds, spans, and penetrates the Earth, but also reconnects it cosmically with other planets, solar systems, and entire galaxies. In other high vibrational ages, this knowledge was available, and these connecting lines and points were used in a strategically perfect way. Many of the ancient sacred structures we still see today, the pyramids and temples, were built in these specific places quite deliberately because they could then bundle the energy and use it in a unique way for the earth and for humanity. And that too is now becoming available again. So, for example, with these structures and strategically well positioned, yes, buildings and facilities. One could generate free energy. One could communicate not just on Earth over long distances, but also in the cosmos. We could use portals to travel much faster, to travel in now time, so to speak, and so on. There's so much more that was possible through this, and that is now coming back. In the Iron Age, all this knowledge was lost, and from a certain point on was also deliberately suppressed by the architects of the fear matrix to maintain their own power. And not only that, certain measures were even created to deliberately block the Earth's energy pathways. And these gigantic energy grids are now being reactivated step by step. Just as in our human body, all the energy pathways, all the chakras, all the nadis, simply everything that's there is being freed up, unblocked, and can find its way back to its divine blueprint. In the same way, the Earth and our entire cosmic structure are finding their way back to the divine blueprint. So when these energy grids are active again, it has a huge effect on the energetics of the entire planet, and of course, in turn, on the consciousness of humanity. Everything is interconnected. And these energy pathways, these energy grids, are also being activated as these massive solar radiations, the solar flares, increasingly hit the Earth and communicate with the Earth's inner sun. And they also communicate with the inner sun of every human being. And so all these manifestations from Mother Earth that we are seeing everywhere right now, which are more powerful than ever in our official records, they are part of this because Mother Earth is also restructuring herself. All the earthquakes, the volcanic eruptions, the floods, Mother Earth uses all of this as an opportunity, or rather she creates it, to clear her underground channels again and make them fully energetically passable. And the reawakening of these grid networks is not just geologically phenomenal, it is also a spiritual activation that practically re-enables the connection for us humans to the higher dimensions. So this entire communication in the cosmos will become much clearer again for many, for all of us, step by step. Cosmic light codes are flowing again as they did before, when everything was still free, within the natural Earth grid. And then they interact with the energy fields of us humans and also of the animals that are receptive to them. And some people feel that they should travel to certain places now. And I say follow that call because perhaps you are being called to anchor and stabilize very specific energies there. Maybe there is also very special information for you that is part of your awakening process. So, Earth and humanity are currently undergoing gigantic upgrades to evolve us from a three-dimensionally oriented planet back into a multi-dimensional, living, conscious organism. Now, of course, there are people who have already been involved with spiritual things for a long time, perhaps with energetic healing, with sacred geometry, or with cosmic knowledge. And these people can, in some cases, already notice a truly dramatic expansion of their abilities and possibilities. What's really important for everyone is to stay in the heart. Even if you notice, wow, things are now possible that you only dreamed of 1, 2, or 3 years ago, don't slip into your ego, right? It's very important to stay in your heart, be aware that you are a link between heaven and earth, and that you can only truly unfold and maintain your power here when the heart has already transcended the ego. These newly freed energy pathways in the earth, in the cosmos, but also within ourselves, they are an immense amplifier that practically challenges the knowledge of each individual, pushing them to always align with the highest good. So for some who may have accumulated false knowledge, even in the spiritual realm, there will simply be a clearing out a resorting and a realignment. In connection with the fear matrix, it's also important for me to mention one more thing. It was actually very important in order to be able to carry out this suppression at all, that the masculine and feminine energies, which are primal forces within us and also in all living things on this earth, were distorted. They were distorted and weakened. For centuries, human civilization has been dominated by a very unbalanced, seemingly overpowering masculine energy with control, competition, and the pursuit of material gain. The left brain was simply promoted, logical thinking, while the feminine qualities like intuition, softness, being in the flow, and feelings were all suppressed, yes, even demonized in religions. And yes, of course, political structures were also used, but above all, the religious aspect has been deeply ingrained in many people over generations and incarnations. And that's how it was possible for this patriarchal system to establish itself in the first place. The system whose downfall, by the way, we are observing right now. The separation from our primal mother, from primal nature, and also from feminine wisdom is now giving way to reconnection. And what's happening is that the distorted masculine and feminine energies are now coming back into balance. So when you keep hearing that femininity must now return, yes, that's only half the truth. Femininity is not supposed to displace masculinity now, but rather both primal forces are meant to remember themselves and return to their completely natural power and balance. And we might experience a few more balancing acts both in the world and within ourselves until this is fully complete, but everything is already on its way. And very importantly, when I speak of masculine and feminine, I never mean gender, but this fundamental inner orientation. For example, the element of water, the feminine, united with the masculine element of fire. The above united with the below, the spiritual with the earthly, the right with the left. Everything must come back to the center. And so, as this divine femininity reawakens, this distorted and completely overwhelmed masculinity is also healed, and then everything can realign itself. And this new alignment that we are experiencing naturally leads to a much more harmonious and heart-based way of life, which, of course, begins within us. Yes, we must bring masculine and feminine aspects, activity and passivity back into balance within ourselves. And then that expands into our partnerships, into sexuality, into relationships, into families, and more into the collective. In the fear matrix, it was considered normal, for example, for families to be torn apart very early on so the woman could go back to work, and the children were then cared for by strangers in unfamiliar places, among unfamiliar people. And the same for the elderly. The grandpas and grandmas, they sat alone in their apartments or were already in some kind of nursing home. And now the heart compass simply shows us again that everything belongs together. That love can flow again, forgiveness can flow, that we can once again act in a way that supports life and perhaps also consider multi-generational solutions, as was once common practice, and was actually very healthy for everyone involved. The relationships we'll experience in the new world will no longer be based on control or dependency with all the strange behaviors that come with them. Instead, they will be guided by mutual respect, with understanding, with love, with mindfulness. And also, everyone is allowed to choose, every soul is allowed to choose, and we can grow together. You don't always have to understand everything, but you also shouldn't manipulate or have to be right. And this healing and restoration of the earth, it begins now. It begins through our own healing and restoration, but also through all this cosmic help that we have. And even if much may seem to be lost right now because the earth is so polluted, the ocean's so polluted because so much has been exploited, yes, that's true, but it's also only part of the truth. Because when humanity returns to unity, returns to a connection with all life, then things like that will stop immediately. Then nothing more will be polluted and exploited here. Instead, we will once again honor and care for nature and the animals too. Then we will again recognize this sacredness in all life and also learn again to live in certain rhythms. And then sustainable and life-affirming projects will spring up from the ground very quickly. I can see it internally, how quickly that happens, because there is always the level where everything already exists. And earlier I mentioned the helper souls, the star seeds, and they bring this knowledge with them. And also on our earth, a lot of knowledge is already there about free energy and so on. It's just that until now, it was simply, yes, it couldn't get out, it was suppressed. And now, little by little, all of that is being set free. And then, with combined forces and inspirations, we will very quickly find solutions that may seem unthinkable right now, but they are already there, and they will show success very, very quickly. Because, strictly speaking, in the new world, in the fifth dimension that we are all evolving into, that doesn't exist. And it has never existed there. So it could even be that from one day to the next, once we've made this leap in consciousness, it's over. That everything there is pure again, and everything is back in its natural divine order. I'd also like to briefly mention AI. It's currently advancing faster than ever before, at least faster than we can ever remember. And of course, that raises questions. Where is this leading? How will humanity evolve with this AI? Is it dangerous? Will we use AI as a tool for our evolution, or will it sooner or later become a force that actually distances us further from our true nature, that separates us instead of bringing us back into unity? AI has a lot of good in it, There are many possibilities. There's a lot of potential to improve current skills and possibilities, to increase efficiency in many processes, and thus also to give us more time for ourselves. So in some cases, there are truly revolutionary advances in science, in medicine, supported by AI. But there is also a rather strange interest in merging human consciousness with artificial systems, in other words, transhumanism. And that, of course, would be a massive limitation or even the complete loss of our spiritual consciousness. And you have to know that, you have to understand that while we could take certain shortcuts with this technology now, in the long run, we would be blocking ourselves again. So AI, somewhere in production facilities or wherever, in search engines and all that, that's fine. But in our bodies, it has no place, most certainly not. When technology is used without higher consciousness, it becomes a tool of control, and instead of serving self-empowerment, it will enslave us. This means that if people now let themselves be deceived by the shortcuts, by the short-term possibilities that AI offers, then they are really making a very, very bad trade, and they may not be able to ascend that way. AI can simplify our daily lives. It can give us time for things that truly bring us joy, that serve our soul's plan. But there are very important boundaries that must be respected. We must not let AI dictate our decisions. And we must never allow our natural connection to divine wisdom, inner guidance, and of course our free will to be disrupted in any way. We should continue to take ourselves seriously and to discover and nurture our multidimensionality more and more instead of relying on any external systems. Because whenever we rely on something else, we give away our power. And right now, in this time of self-empowerment, that's the worst thing we can do. Of course, even if we do that, then we are choosing the other timeline, and that's okay too. That also has its purpose. No one is lost. In the end, everything is always good, and if it's not good, it's not the end yet. You know that saying? But whoever is ready to ascend now should not waste their time on such things. Our relationship with technology can be a good one. Technology doesn't have to be an enemy at all, but we must handle it consciously. It can bring great discoveries and relief, but it's important that we always keep it in harmony with life-affirming values in this new age on this earth. Technology must always have only one position, as a servant to the conscious human being and never the other way around. That just has to be clear. And the more people awaken spiritually now, the more they will, of course, be able to use AI in a life-affirming way and support the new values instead of destroying them. But right now, in this time of change, it's still a bit like a race against time. Yes, is the AI faster or are we faster? And that's why this whole podcast is here, to simply bring some clarity to the different timelines. In this transition, we have many helpers from the entire cosmos. It's not just the frequencies. I explain this in more detail in my seminars and also in the book Involution. The 150 megahertz that practically remind our DNA of its divinity, of its divine order, but it's also soulmates everywhere. Star nations friendly to us everywhere. They are by our side. Perhaps some are incarnated here with us, others support us from the subtle realms. What's important is they don't intervene so directly because it is the challenge for humanity to now experience self-empowerment, to choose love, and thus to bring about this decisive turning point themselves. Even if it's already predetermined, we still chose the incarnation where we can experience it. And these helpers, they continually transmit wisdom and ideas to us. They help us implement new ideas and new projects, and they also bring us together. These are the synchronicities with like-minded people so that it goes faster, so that it's easier to realize certain projects. The goal of these little helpers is to help humanity regain this sovereignty and also to rejoin the great cosmic family. Because we are all one. We are all one huge cosmic wonderful family. And for a very long time now, humanity has not remembered that. And many people are already experiencing this contact, even with non-incarnated beings through telepathic messages, through encounters in dreams, or yes, in meditations or other situations. There are always energy transmissions that make us more and more aware that we have been helped. And the more conscious and clear we are, the more commonplace these contacts will become for us again. When we are aware of our multidimensionality again, then it's completely normal. It's nothing special at all that we are in contact everywhere and at all times, even across dimensions. Not just here with a friend, with a neighbor, with partners and so on, but also transdimensionally everywhere. And the more we truly integrate that higher consciousness, the more we tune into it, the more we are in the flow with all life in the entire cosmos. Humanity now stands at this crossroads between two very, very different realities. On one side, there is a new Earth timeline, where unity, joy, love, and wisdom simply sweep away the chaos of the old world, almost making it forgotten. And many people have already reached and stabilized this timeline, and they already feel this sense of inner peace that can no longer be disturbed no matter what appears to be happening out there on the world stage. They have this unshakable inner peace, and yes, this expansion of consciousness. Life flows with more synchronicity, it's lighter, and yes, what I've noticed is that even gravity can feel different because the new timeline is indeed characterized by more lightness. But there is also this other timeline, and for those who still feel great resistance, who are in fear or feel emotionally torn, they may not have fully decided yet and are still jumping back and forth. And this is now truly a great and important invitation to let go, to rethink, and to truly choose anew. As I said, it's not about one timeline being superior to the other. There is no such competition on these levels. But it is a vibrational choice that is happening now, and it is our choice whether we follow the old paradigm, which is becoming more and more unpleasant also through all the news that we can still consume, even in the alternative media, or whether we dare to stand up for our values, to simply give up our limitations, traumas, and yes, any controlled ideas and implanted thoughts, and to be completely and utterly authentic. To live from the heart, and instead of accumulating some supposed knowledge somewhere, to rather throw everything overboard and allow more and more wisdom to rise up within ourselves. Do we dare to do that? When the old systems have collapsed, and they are already doing so, then it will be exciting and enlightening to witness how life-friendly humans and animals and nature and, of course, technology can coexist, and how productive it can all be, how joyfully it can all work together. Consciousness will be paramount, and because people will remember again, because they will have their divine blueprint active again, because they will remember their divine nature and order again, abuse will simply become impossible. This means everything will be reformed, the schools will be reformed, health will be understood and, of course, promoted in a completely new, holistic, and self-responsible way. The financial system, it won't just get a new name, but will also serve abundance, the abundance of all living beings. Because abundance is our nature, anything else makes no sense at all. Communities will once again be based on mutual respect. And work, and also school learning, that will be a joy. It will be allowed to happen again as nature intends, with natural curiosity, with the natural understanding of what can I do, what else do I want to learn, what did I come here for, what do I want to explore more deeply, what has my soul not yet experienced in this way. This is how we are allowed to develop, and not through a specific school program. This entire guidance will once again take place at heart level, not even at eye level, but at heart level. And that's why everyone will always be right exactly where they are. Strictly speaking, we already are. But this will be felt much more intensely. So to conclude, every thought, every feeling, and every decision determines the timeline you enter. Choose wisely, be conscious. And as I said, you can dive deeper into everything I've said here in my countless podcasts, and especially in my book, Involution. And I would now like to end with a poem I wrote and wish you all the best on your path. Your creation, let it be your choice with your entire being. A belief that it is possible. A deep inner knowing that there is more happiness, more love, more joy, more meaning. What helps with this is a mix of courage, trust, and a thirst for adventure. All of this is within you. No matter where you stand right now, how old you are, what you have experienced, and what your situation looks like. When you, in your creator being, choose that it is time to experience something new, then all the tiny particles that make up your reality will rearrange themselves. Your reality is not out there, it is within you. The more you accept everything in your life as your creation, the stronger your power to create becomes. It's wonderful that you exist.